Hi, Nicole. Good to see you back on the show. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Simon, for having me. How have things been going for you as well?
The last thing on band-aids. We talked about the day one CPT and we talked about these other kind of scammy things that might happen. What other band-aid solutions can you think of that people need to be aware of during this crucial time?
Writing scholarly publications, getting yourself out there into media outlets, or really positioning yourself with the right relationships can really get you into a scenario where in a potential reality where you don't get selected for the H1B, you can immediately pivot to the O1.
I mean, USCIS is literally indirectly serving you all the things on a platter that you need to build a very shiny career.
And the reason why I emphasize starting earlier rather than later is that these things do take time, right? Even if you're able to do it in as little as 3 to 6 months, the planning is so key.
Speaking of good times, well, the H1B lottery results are out. What do you think about the stats?
And more into, hey, there's this specific thing that I need to learn in the United States or I need to do in the United States that just cannot be done in my home country. If you can prove that and the organization or company is willing to kind of put out a very thoughtful curricular process or at least evidence the kind of learnings that you're going to gain.
A lot of students don't even realize what kind of fertile ground they are on for research kind of activities, publishing kind of activities.
You should work with who you're comfortable with, right? But always ask them about their expertise, right? You want to surround yourself with people and the consultants and the experts that are really going to elevate your profile and position it in the right way.
Hi, Nicole. Good to see you back on the show. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Simon, for having me. How have things been going for you as well?
Super busy, but can't complain. We've been helping a lot of people together, so that's really good. Speaking of good times, well, the H1B lottery results are out. What do you think about the stats?
Honestly, I think the stats have been pretty good. I've been doing this for a really long time, right? And the reality is that this is probably the first year in a long time that I felt that there were a lot of selections, right? Especially particularly for individuals who applied under master's cap. I felt like a lot of people were doing really, really well. Actually, what I've seen within the immigration community in particular is the fact that it feels like there were a lesser number of bad applicants. And what that resulted in is that everybody who truly has a really solid job, who really needs a place here in the United States, are getting those results in their favor right now.
Last year, when I was looking at the stats, it looked like it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 in some cases that got selected in the H1B lottery. Has that improved this year? Has that improved to maybe 1 in 3 or something?
Yeah, I would say it's closer to that number. Like when I'm taking into account like Manifest's personal kind of numbers right now, we're looking towards 1 in 3. It's closer to that number for sure.
Okay.
And I even know some firms that got about 1 in 2 actually. So
Wow.
It's a really high rate of approvals. And that really means to me that there was probably a lesser number of applicants this year. One of the things that we've seen around the news and of course with the immigration community is the fact that the $215 fee was a little bit of a game changer, right? In the past, the $10 fee, because it was so minimal, there were just truly like a lot of bad applications, right? People coming in, applying on their own, sometimes without their employer's consent, right? They would get selected and they would never move forward with the H1B because they can't without the employer's consent. And that's kind of what ended up happening and pushing so many people to get selections in the second round. Because last year, there were a lot of people who got selected in the second round because many people who were selected in the first round didn't move forward. This year, however, it seems that $215 fee really had an impact.
Is that the only thing you think, or is there also a certain perception of this current administration which might have played into employers not wanting to sponsor that many candidates or closing sponsorships and things like that?
Definitely, for sure. There's other factors, right? I do think that in addition to like literally what you just discussed, there's also the contractions in the tech field, right? I think a lot of people are feeling that a little bit of pain when it comes to having graduated with a computer science degree or in software engineering, trying to find that first role. I find that some of the companies that historically would have enrolled tons and tons of people into the lottery have kind of paused themselves or stopped themselves temporarily from doing that, leaving open room for maybe some of the smaller organizations like startups to really come in there and get the selections that they need.
I see. So let's assume that someone, and there are a lot of these people who even reached out to us, did not get the H1B lottery. And, the odds are still, even if the odds are increasing, the odds are still not in people's favor, because 1 in 3 is like majority of the people don't get selected versus get selected. So if someone is not selected in this H1B lottery, and it was not their last attempt. So let's go scenario by scenario. There's probably a new, fresh off the boat kind of a student, F1 student on OPT, applied for the H1B for the first time and faced a rejection. And I've been there a bunch of years ago. So the discouragement or the amount of emotional turmoil they go through is unprecedented at that point. Usually after the second rejection, you kind of would have already settled into the rejection more for the first time, so it's kind of a little softer. But when people get rejected for the first time, they think that it's the end of the world completely. So what advice would you have for such people who are going through that kind of a turmoil right now?
Right. So let's say, assuming that that was their only chance, right? And maybe they had a little bit of time to await for a potential second round. I always tell a lot of students that, don't panic in the beginning. Right. You need to definitely talk to a professional because there are other options that are out there. Right. So, for example, I've had a lot of people be able to convert from F1 to a J1 specialist visa before, right? Depending on the role that they're in. A lot of engineering professionals and people in, let's say, scientific backgrounds or the natural sciences, you have a good relationship with your employer. You try to pitch them a J1 specialist application. That can work. Just to kind of introduce to the audience what a J1 specialist is there's an argument that can be made that you provide some sort of specialization, some sort of special skill that needs to be imparted to an American workplace. It does buy you a little bit of time in order to bridge the gap into another lottery season in the future. Another alternative that may not be as helpful, but doesn't necessarily require sponsorship is to go back to school, right? If you're already here on an F1 visa, there's nothing restricting you other than, of course, financials, which I can deeply appreciate and understand, for you to kind of enroll into a master's program or another program to buy yourself more time. Some of those programs can impart work authorization if that's the primary concern for a lot of individuals. But don't forget that you're already here on an F1. Being able to enroll in another school doesn't require you to necessarily file anything like another 539 form or another filing with USCIS. It's an I-20 SEVIS transfer, all done internally between the schools. So it could be, let's call it, the fastest Band-Aid and the most efficient Band-Aid, so to speak.
She was an F1 student, did not get the H1B after 3 attempts, was working at a very good workplace in New York, in the fintech area, and then kind of worked through the profile building process and applied for the O1. That's when she, got the O1, and then now is able to get a good night's sleep without that visa timeline looming over her head. So that also kind of showed that O1 could be a potential option as well for someone. Can we shed some light on that and what people can do starting now if they have been rejected in the lottery to move towards the O1 category?
Yeah. So the one thing that I will say about the O1 is that the earlier that you start with the building process, the better it is, right? I generally tell a lot of students who are, let's call it, approaching their junior or senior years, or literally like the moment that they started even their OPT, especially if they have some OPT, that hedging your bets on the H1B alone just may not be enough, right? Just as you said earlier, Simon, the majority of people don't get selected, right? 1 in 3, even if it's a better chance than we've seen in a really long time, still leaves 2 out of 3 people without a selection, right? So the earlier that you start with planning and targeting any criteria that's relevant to you, writing scholarly publications, getting yourself out there into media outlets, or really positioning yourself with the right relationships can really get you into a scenario where in potential reality where you don't get selected for the H1B, you can immediately pivot to the O1. And the reason why I emphasize starting earlier rather than later is that these things do take time, right? Even if you're able to do it in as little as 3 to 6 months, the planning is so key because at the end of the day, to build yourself up for success for an O1, to be able to get that approval, we want to show that you have achievements over a period of time, right? So students, if you're listening to this podcast, the earlier that you start talking to the right people, talking maybe to even Smart Green Card or even a law firm, really you will be putting yourself for the best position regardless of what happens in any future lottery.
Exactly. I can't agree more with you, Nicole. And on top of that, what I would like to also add is generally people look at it as an activity they are doing only for a visa purpose, which is completely wrong. You have to look at it as an activity of career development, which who doesn't want to build their career in a good way? And these are all, I mean, USCIS is literally indirectly serving you all the things on a platter that you need to build a very shiny career. You just need to do that. And you happen to then evolve to, qualify for the O1 or the EB1, which is definitely going to alleviate a lot of pain for you, but you will probably experience a career growth trajectory that is 2x or 3x of what you would have otherwise experienced if you did not have this constraint.
100%. I always tell a lot of people that when you do things that are related to building for the O1 criteria or the EB1 criteria, it easily distinguishes yourself from the rest of the market. Take, for example, a normal 9-to-5 engineer who didn't have to take any of these things into consideration, right? When you approach a job opportunity and you show that you're also an innovator, hey, I've done published research, right? I have citations to my work that are out there, or I've been interviewed by this outlet because of some interesting things that I've done, maybe for open source projects, or I'm an IEEE session chair, all kinds of things that you could have done. That easily elevates your profile from the generic worker that is applying for a given role. So if your goal is to impress some of these large FANG companies or like the next best, greatest startup that's out there, that is definitely a way to distinguish yourself from the wider workforce, while also combining your interest with the fact that you need to position yourself really well for US stability.
Let's double click into that a little bit because a lot of people out there already know the O1 requirements. But for folks that don't know the O1 requirements, can we just walk through the main top of the line kind of requirements that the O1 has?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people forget that the O1 is still a little bit different from the EB1A, but I will highlight the ones that definitely should be targeted and the ones that people should know about, right? So number one is definitely judging, right? You are a member of a panel or a jury and you're judging others that are in your field. Traditionally, this could be done through peer reviewing, where you're reviewing scholarly articles for publication in an industry publication or scholarly journal of some format within your industry or field. Separately, there's another category known as associations, where you are a member of an organization that requires outstanding achievement to join. Just as a little bit of a highlight, the earlier that you join these organizations, the better it is for you in the long run, because some of these organizations, to elevate you to higher positions, you need to have been part of that organization for at least a period of time. Associations is a really great one to build into, especially if you're early into your journey, into your career. Separately, outside of judging and associations, I would also talk about press, right? There is a category where if you have press about you, and for creatives, it's extended to press by or about you, right? That's another category where if you've been interviewed or you've been Q&A'd and your name is reflected in some sort of media publication, category that can be met with the O1 with a lot of effort and also really great for your career as a whole. But there are also other categories as well that are out there, but those three fundamentally are the ones that I find that a lot of people should be focusing on, because a lot of it is, quite frankly, within your self-control, right? And then maybe another one is definitely scholarly articles, where if you're writing research publications and it's getting published in a journal that is peer-reviewed, can also definitely elevate your profile and meet a criterion for the O1 as well.
it's a big irony, Nicole, that a lot of students don't even realize what kind of fertile ground they are on for
Yeah.
research kind of activities, publishing kind of activities. Because every time I meet students who probably haven't even applied for the H1B lottery even once, the question they ask us is, "Hey, Simon, I'm in school right now. I don't have any opportunities around me." And then when I start digging, "Hey, you're in school, so do you have professors in school?" The answer is yes. "Do you have PhD people in school?" The answer is yes. So does that really mean that you don't have any opportunities for research, really? And then when you start reasoning it and peeling the layers of the onion, that's when you start realizing they are like, "Hey, yeah, you just opened my eyes. Like, why didn't I ever think of this?"
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you from personal experience, having gone through college here in the United States, right? It's because sometimes when you're a student in the US, you kind of live in your own vacuum. You live in like the community that you're in. If you're not surrounded a lot with other people who are building towards this or are focusing on research, sometimes you just are coming in with blinders. Universities, in my perspective, don't do the best job at advising their students on how to prime themselves up for longer term success when it comes to stability in the United States. But I do 100% agree with you. Sometimes when I do consultations, the first thing that I say is, hey, did you talk to your former professors? Did you talk to people in academia? Because by virtue of those roles, by being scholars, they're already doing what you also need to be doing in order to build your profile. I'll give you a key example, right? When it comes to judging, it's all about, at least in the traditional method, peer review, right? A lot of these professors are already editorial board members for journals that are out there. They can give a student specific insight on where they need to apply, what databases that they need to be a part of as early as possible in order to get some of those opportunities. I always tell people, especially graduate students who for some reason they definitely have no idea these things existed, you're in the prime position because you've already graduated with a degree. You have the foundational expertise needed to do these peer reviews, but you need to attack the category. You need to make active efforts. So 100% agree with you. Academia, being in that area is definitely a fertile ground, right? When you're in school, you have so many connections that maybe you just didn't think of, right? Use them. Just use them, right? Talk to everybody, go to many engagements as you can, go to many community groups as you can, see what's out there. Trust me.
I see a lot of people also get fixated on bucketing things. I'll give you an
Right.
example. There's the industry path. Obviously, the journals that the industry that cover industry material are trade journals and those kinds of publications. And then there's the core research path. And people sometimes think that authorship and publishing stuff is only for people in the core research path, and people who are in the industry cannot write or publish anything. I have been doing this for 2.5 to 3 years now, and every time I break my head on this, trying to make people understand, do not bucket things like that. Anybody is free to write stuff about industry best practices, about problems you've solved in the past, which probably could be helpful for a lot more other people out there. Any type of authorship is possible, and you don't need to kind of have a license in order to write a paper and publish it out there.
Right. I also 100% agree with you. Like, there's so many people who feel like, oh, because I didn't do X, Y, Z, or I didn't go down this pathway, what makes me allowed to write these things? And the answer is nobody's preventing you, right? No one is limiting you on that, right? Go and do it. You'd be surprised. So one of the things that I say is that a lot of publications that are out there, whether it's media outlets or let's say technical blogs, right? Very popular technical blogs, they're hungry for editorial content, right? They're hungry for guest posts, right? If you've done something that was interesting, even if it was during your scholastic activities, what if it was you contributed to a significant open source project, right? Or you just did something that was a discovery of methodologies that can improve someone's efficiency in doing something, talk about it, publish about it, right? Sometimes one of the things that I tell people is that the building for an O1 or an EB1, just like you said, is not just about buckets, and it's not necessarily just about the categories, right? Putting yourself out there, even if it's writing something simplistic, can open up opportunities and doors that do build directly into the criteria, right? So even if it's not the traditional scholarly publication, right? If you get a technical blog out there, you start elevating your name, you never know if you get invited to other opportunities that can build you into judging, that can build you into scholarly articles, or can even build you to the awards category as well, right? So 100% agree with you, where don't limit yourself, right? Do the opportunities that are in front of you, and separately discover the opportunities, and don't feel like just because I'm not a professor, just because I'm not a VP of AI at like a big company, doesn't mean that no one is going to be interested in the work or the writings that you have.
The secondary benefits of the work that you do initially, like for example, writing a paper, will get you probably that necessary attention to be invited as a judge later, all that. It is so true, because, and a lot of our clients in their initial stages kind of confuse this because they end up thinking that I'm going to get the judging activity, maybe in the form of a peer review on day one. That is probably not going to happen. Even if it happens, if it happens, it needs to be forced, which forced is not a way that you need to, evolve your profile towards the EB1A or the O1A. It's common sense, right? Only when you publish articles out there and be a thought leader in the space, that's when someone would want to invite you to judge other people's work in the form of a peer reviewer, etc. Which is why there is kind of like a little bit of lag that happens. It's about 1 or 2 or 3 months before they start getting these judging opportunities. And sometimes people get uneasy and they kind of, say, hey, what the heck is going on? Like, I'm not getting any opportunity. It simply doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I always tell people it's like we're building a house, right? You need to build a solid foundation in order for us to start putting up the walls, the drywalls, the roof, and everything that builds the O1 or the EB1, right? You and I, we're not magicians, right? We can't necessarily make a house come out of thin air. We need something to leverage in order to get you those prime and great opportunities that will allow you to be put into the best position for some of these visa categories that are out there, right? So one of the things that I tell a lot of people is that if you're fresh out of college, right, and you haven't necessarily done literally anything else other than like completing your degree, some of the initial things that you need to do, while they seem very small and you can't really understand why it would meet any of the criteria, they're absolutely necessary, because in order for anyone to get you into an article context to be interviewed, we still need to tell the journalist why, right? And what to talk about. So yeah, also we'll tell people foundation, definitely needed, primarily to build your credibility. And credibility is super important in both the O1 and the EB1 context.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of these Band-Aid methods that people usually adopt. And I think awareness is really important about those solutions, or quote unquote solutions at this time, because a lot of people are vulnerable. A lot of people are desperate to solve immigration related issues that they are having because of a loss in the H1B lottery or whatever else it may be. So number one, day one CPT. Is it legal? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's legal. Definitely a bit of a vulnerable area, because I feel like over the years, all of us have heard like some rumors or rustlings about how it's not great. I've also seen a lot of discussion and chatter on, like, let's say Reddit and forums, where people are like, this is a red flag and this is a problem. Whenever I tell a client about day one CPT, I make one really significant emphasis. One is that it is legal, right? It is an exception to the rule. And because it's an exception to the rule is why you have to be cautious about it. So I do tell people do it, but the one thing that I want people to take away is always keep good records that you actually went to your classes. So just to explain to the broader public on what day one CPT is, right? If you enroll into a master's degree or a higher program, there are some universities and organizations that will issue curricular practical training or work authorization on the first day of that program starting. Right? The reason why it's an exception to the rule is because the universities are claiming that whatever training or whatever work experience that you are doing is critical to the curriculum that you are engaging in, right? These are not programs that are known in larger universities. You're not going to be going to Columbia or Harvard and getting day one CPT. Usually it's smaller organizations, because there's a lot of compliance requirements that some of the larger universities are not willing to do, right? Now, where this can become a problem for any immigrant's journey in the United States is that whenever you decide to change status from the F1 to another status, or even if you decide to consular process for whatever reason, the biggest question that gets asked by the government is, hey, prove to us that you maintained your F1 status, that you actually went to classes, right? Because they all know. Fundamentally, the reason why most people do day one CPT is not necessarily for the additional schooling, but for that work authorization. So they're double checking that you actually fulfilled your end of the bargain by doing a full course load. A lot of universities will say, oh, we'll keep the attendance records. We'll keep all of the documentation to show these things. Always rely on yourself. Never just rely on one mechanism. Keep copies of your syllabi, keep copies of the exams that you've taken, keep copies of your homework, or whenever you go to classes physically, buy a cup of coffee at the local cafeteria, receipts for books. Why? Because that is the definitive proof that the government is usually looking for to say, did you actually do these courses? It's not enough to have charts and graphs that show your attendance records. They literally do want to know, did you actually sit down for these classes? If you do hold really good records for yourself, you are again priming yourself up for success for those maintenance status and can avoid some of those red flags that a lot of other individuals encounter. Second quick point, always double check the school. Right? At the end of the day, I don't know every single organization that does day one CPT, but you need to make sure that you're comfortable with the organization. Does it feel real? Does it feel authentic? Am I actually going to still at least learn something out of this? Right? If it's not any of those things and it feels like a dishonest organization, move on to a different one.
There are a ton of organizations, I think, over the past 5 years that got busted for this very thing, right? Like they don't have a real program and they're just exchanging it for money and giving documentation to show that the person is actually attending classes. The other word for this is fraud. I mean, simply put.
Simply. Like, do not fall into that trap. And even if a university tells you like, oh no, it's fine. Like, just work 100% of the time. You don't need to go into classes or anything like that. That is completely wrong, right? A real day one CPT program will tell you, hey, you need to be coming to classes, right? You need to be physically here for a period of time, whether even if it's just once a week on the weekend for the full day, right? It still needs to be a full course load. Right? So if they're telling you, if you pay us, we'll just give you the work authorization, you don't really need to do anything, avoid it. Completely avoid it.
Ironically, it also extends to people who say, just pay us, you'll get the green card or any type of visa. It's simply an immediate red flag that should go off in your head. If someone is coming to you with the proposition that you don't need to do any work, it'll all get done in a very autopilot, automated manner.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of through the ringer on that. I've had consultations in the past where somebody will tell me, hey, I paid like $300,000 to this organization who told me that they're going to get me a green card. They're going to do the whole perm process for me. No big deal. You're going to walk away with a green card. And then suddenly they get all of these federal indictments and like depositions and witness and all this kind of stuff, because that's not really how it's supposed to happen, right? Nothing is ever easy. That's the truth when it comes to immigration, right? Mm-hmm. So if it is given to you in a silver platter and someone is selling it to you as if, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be amazing, you don't need to do anything, you just have to pay us a fee, that's not even accurate. Because even for like, let's say an EB-5, investor visa, where technically speaking, you're purchasing a green card, it's still not easy. You still have to provide a lot of documentation about like where your money came from, like what is the investment and why the investment should qualify for the EB-5. So again, even in a scenario where it's technically supposed to be what we call pay for play or pay for the green card, there's still many, many steps of compliance. So anything on a silver platter, I would be suspicious.
Yep, stay away from it. The last thing on Band-Aids. We talked about the day one CPT and we talked about these other kind of scammy things that might happen. What other Band-Aid solutions can you think of that people need to be aware of during this crucial time?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting things out there that some people don't utilize or are not aware of. So there's one category where, funny enough, I don't talk about it a lot, and that's because it's a very uncommon visa. It's known as the H3 visa. visa. So the H3 is an alternative to the J1. And the reason why it's so rare is, if I could go back in time, I believe that the H3 was primarily created for a lot of hotel groups or resort groups that could definitively prove that in somebody's home country, that training or such opportunities don't really exist, right? So the H3 visa is a work visa. It's similar to the J1, but less of a cultural exchange component and more into, hey, there's this specific thing that I need to learn in the United States or I need to do in the United States that just cannot be done in my home country. If you can prove that, and the organization or company is willing to kind of put out a very thoughtful curricular process, or at least evidence the kind of learnings that you're going to gain, that could be a pathway. And it's a very, very small pathway. I think it depends on a, let's call it case by case basis. But if you can make the argument, I feel a lot of people have completely forgotten that this visa exists.
Yep, exactly. I think these are all super great insights into, whether someone has not gotten into the H1B or gotten through the H1B lottery, or suffering from any other kind of backlog type of a situation. Generally speaking, we also have like an attorney, one-on-one attorney consultation type of a add-on that people can add to the ticket. People who add that to the ticket, what advice would you have for them to come prepared with, so that an attorney can very efficiently evaluate their profiles for them?
So I have two items, right? So number one is, please provide a detailed resume. I don't want, let's say, a resume that just has your job title and where you're working. We want to have bullet points that are included, call it 2 or 3 each, right? That explain, what it is that you do at those organizations, right? What are some major projects and initiatives that you're engaged in, right? That's some really critical information. A second thing that I do recommend is, whether it's a Google Doc or Word Doc or an Excel sheet that you print out, divide some of the, let's say it's an EB1 or an O1, divide some of the categories, fill in some information on some of the things that you are doing or plan on doing or have already done to meet some of those criterions, because that makes it a lot easier for us attorneys to kind of walk through one by one how we feel about those activities, right? Because if you're trying to get the most efficient conversation, if you're trying to get the most out of that conversation, if you break down to us one by one some of the things that you have already done or are planning to do, it just organizes the conversation really, really well, right?
And I always go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, and I know I said two things, but what does come to mind as well is, don't stress yourself out if you're not sure if something doesn't meet a criteria. You can make a miscellaneous document or another box in a sheet that just says bonus documents and put in all the information there. And we're happy to take a look, because us, the attorneys, we're the arbiters to decide whether or not something is helpful for you, right? So don't burden yourself with that decision.
Nicole, it's been a few months since we last talked, and every time I talk to you, I hear new examples of clients of yours, of new experiences of immigrants, etc. What is one funny or extremely emotional kind of story that you might have right now of a client that you have experienced in the recent past?
So if you're talking about an emotional journey, we recently got a client approved in like record time, right? The client kind of told us like, hey, I'm really, really concerned about the current administration, and I have young children here in the United States. I really want to secure their futures because I'm really, really worried that they're not going to be able to live in the US in the long term if they age out. Considering kind of the circumstances, we were really able to get this application out in record time, filed it with premium processing, and within honestly a week and a half, EB1A approved. Right. And that person, like, it was, the reason why it was so emotional is because a lot of other individuals that they had spoken to, or a lot of other firms that they had spoken to at least a year before their profile building journeys, was basically told like, hey, this is just not going to happen for you. This is just not something that's feasible for you. You're going to be spending 5-6 years waiting for it. Rely on your perm. You're good with your perm. right? But perm sometimes doesn't help when you're in an EB3 or an EB2 category that's languishing, right? So being able to provide to someone the approval, right? Like, yes, you're in the first preference. You're going to be able to walk away with this green card before any semblance of aging out is going to even be in the picture was very deeply fulfilling, not only for us here at Manifest, but extremely fulfilling for that particular client, right? I think our team did a really, really good job at selling the candidate's compelling narrative, right? I think one of the biggest issues that practitioners face is that careful balance of being too much, right? Giving like 20 letters of recommendation and writing like a 120-page cover letter versus giving too little where the officer doesn't understand the relevancy of that person's work within their industry, right? I think Manifest, hand in hand with SGC, I think we do work really well together in taking that careful balance. Not too much, not too little, compelling narrative that really entices the officer to say, hey, you know what? This is a good application. This is a good person. This is somebody that we need here effectively in the United States.
And this really underscores the importance of having good partners in the process for anybody going through the process, whether it is a law firm that represents them in front of the government, or whether it is a firm like ours who help them throughout a year's time or so to build their profiles, or if they're doing it on their own. Whatever it is, it's always good to have good allies with you in the entire process.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think one of the things that I always tell people, especially when they meet me for the first time in a consultation, is that you should work with who you're comfortable with, right? But always ask them about their expertise, right? You want to surround yourself with people and the consultants and the experts that are really going to elevate your profile and position it in the right way. I think a lot of people forget that practitioners, even if we can't necessarily say we specialize in things, they still have a focus or can have a genuine understanding and interest in what it is that you do. The best practitioners, the best consultants, they think about you. They think about what is best for you. You got to surround yourself with that for sure.
Yep, absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Nicole. Thank you so much, Nicole. See you there.
See you soon. All right. Bye.